Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. And thank you, Wally. A special thanks to Wally for organizing and bringing us all together. A round of applause. Thank you, Wally, for all you're doing for peace and justice. It's really a great blessing for me to be here, and thank you all for coming out. And I'm happy to be back in the Newman Center. Maybe some of you know I used to come here almost every January. Years ago, the Jesuits would go home to California, and I would take over. It was a major setback for the Newman Center, I think. Anyway, I've been here for a couple of days, and I've made the most of it. As you see, I'm all red-faced. and there's so many good friends here tonight, and I thank you for coming out. One, I'll point out, well, I didn't say, but I've been the executive director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation in the late 90s. And Wally, one of your speakers in 2 weeks is Luann Guanson, who was the chair. She was my boss, and she just gave me this light. Please welcome Luann. I'll ask you, Luann, to stand up. And she's giving the talk as part of the series in 2 weeks on nonviolence, and I hope you all go to hear Luann speak. Well, I'm just, again, thrilled to be here, very happy, and in this time, and I thought maybe I'd just share a few stories with you, reflect a little bit about nonviolence, talk a little bit about the nonviolence of Jesus, give you a few closing points, and then maybe we can have questions and comments and reflections, and then by the end of the evening we will have resolved everything. I thought you'd laugh more at that, but and please just call me John, because my name is just so darn goofy. Father Dear just doesn't work. I don't know, so, I'm 57 years old, and I had this long journey like all of you, and I was a wild college kid at Duke in the 70s, and I was in the fraternity, was the big man on campus, and played rugby, and my plan was to be a newspaper publisher like my father, a lawyer like my friends, or a rock star, which is really what I wanted to do. Anyway, long story short, one day I got knocked off the fraternity bar stool, saw the light, and gave my life to Jesus. It's been downhill. And so I thought, well, I told my parents I'm going to become a priest, and they were so appalled. They begged me not to and wait. They urged me to wait. I was going to enter the Jesuit novitiate. I thought, okay, what do I want to do? I thought, if I'm going to spend my life following this guy, I should get to know where he lived. So I went, I'm a dopey 20-year-old kid. I go back, Mom, Dad, I'm going off to the Holy Land to hitchhike for 3 months in the footsteps of Jesus. And they thought, my mother went, it's worse than we thought. And the week I left, Israel invaded Lebanon. Do you all know this story, what happened to me? And forgive me if you've heard it before. I'm sure I've told it in this room. All the Holy Land tours were canceled. I was on an empty airplane flying to Tel Aviv, and still a dopey kid. And I had just a Bible, and I went to Jerusalem, and then I hitchhiked to Bethlehem and to Nazareth, and I went to see where Jesus lived, totally oblivious to what was going on. The summer war of 1982, which was all funded and organized by the Pentagon. I researched it for my autobiography. They actually had a name for it, Operation Peace for Galilee. And in 3 months, we killed 60,000 people on the border of Lebanon. Did you know that? No, who cares? It's just another war. Well, I fought too. Who cares? I'm on my holy pilgrimage. My goal was to camp out at the Sea of Galilee. And I did, illegally. And it was incredible. It was so beautiful. And if you walk up to the north part, to Capernaum, where the ruins are, where Jesus lived, there's a little chapel, smaller than this room, if you've been there. And it was a Wednesday afternoon. So there's no tourists for the whole of northern Israel that whole summer. Everything was canceled. I was literally by myself. And I will never forget, it was a Wednesday afternoon. I walk into the chapel, and it said, like graffiti on the wall. You can imagine, in the church, on the wall, it said, "Blessed are the poor." And I thought, That doesn't sound good. I'm looking, it says, blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, the gentle, the nonviolent. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those persecuted for working for justice. On the altar in big letters, love your enemies, the chapel of the Beatitudes. And not being very bright, the light went on, and I said out loud in the small chapel, oh my God, I think he's serious. This has never occurred to me. I'm sure it has with all you holy peacemakers, but my plan was to be a pious priest, which obviously you see didn't take. I'm trying to make you laugh, and it's not working. But anyway, I'm telling you what happened to me. The question is, how did this poor guy end up like this? Still trying to make you laugh. But anyway, I was overwhelmed by the Beatitudes. And I, for that split second, thought, what if Jesus is at least as smart as we are? I'm just saying. And he actually meant that this is the job description of the Christian. So I walked out on the balcony. When you're on holy pilgrimage, even wackier than usual. There's the whole Sea of Galilee. I'm talking to God. And I said, are you kidding me? This is what you want me to do? And I thought, and I said, okay, I will promise to give my life to the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount and do all this stuff on one condition. If you give me a sign. Wasn't that brilliant? Because we don't get signs anymore. And I could say, I tried, but you didn't come through. I always joke, I found a loophole. Anyway, all of a sudden there were these loud explosions, and 3 huge black Israeli jets fell from the sky, breaking the sound barrier. Boom, boom, boom. Swooping down over the Sea of Galilee, flew right over me onto the border of Lebanon, dropping a whole bunch of bombs. And it changed my life. And I said, okay, I will do this for the rest of my life. And that's why I'm here tonight. And it's just what happened to me. Now, and I've been reflecting, as I invite you to reflect on what has led you on the journey to peace and nonviolence. When did you begin to wake up and take a step on a new road to peace? We're talking about turning away from a culture of violence and war and killing, down this new gospel path, the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. What happened to you? It's important to reflect on it. And where are you going now? And what happened to me is I realized that had been going on every hour that I was there. The jets were swooping down on the Sea of Galilee. I never noticed it. Who cares? And it was just that moment the Word of God touched me, and then I began to put reality like it's meant to be lived and taken seriously. And I entered the Jesuits the next week, and then like a week later, I'm sitting at the feet of my friend and great teacher, Daniel Berrigan. Maybe some of you know Dan, who just died last year, my friend at age 95. Well, if you're friends with the Berrigans, it's like a requirement to get arrested. He was like, go get arrested at the Pentagon, kid, and report back to me. So I did. And now you've heard I've been arrested 80 times. I was just arrested in January, and I have a problem with recidivism, and I can't vote. I can't travel to a lot of countries. I'm banned from a lot of countries. I'm highly monitored by the government. And as Dan says, it's very exciting. And then that led me to go to El Salvador in 1985 to work with the Jesuits, who were later assassinated at the university. And they sent me out to work in the refugee camp when the bombs were falling. And my job was, when the death squads came in to kill people, send out the young, white, stupid gringo North American. Maybe they won't kill us because I'm there. It was incredible. Talk about working through your nonviolence fast. Because suddenly here come the death squads in the middle of El Salvador. It's 1985 at the height of the war. And they're just kids with machine guns, all funded by the United States. And my tactic of nonviolence was to play the stupid American, which comes easy for me. Hi, how are you? Can I get you a cup of coffee? You know, they got machine guns. And they were like, well, this guy's an idiot. I just can't deal with him. And they would leave. It always worked. I'm still trying to make you laugh, and it's not working. I thought that was really amazing. And I learned so much. Wally, that was a real proving ground for me. Because people were being killed, and the Jesuits were brutally killed. You remember on November 16th, 1989, 6 Jesuit priests and the 2 women who were their housekeepers were shot and killed. And they were my friends, and not to gross you out, but when I went a few months later to be there with John Sobrino, the theologian, the survivor, my friend, he said to me, which you may not know, so they forced the Jesuits at 1 a.m. to lie down on the ground, and then they shot and killed them, and then they removed their brains and set them next to their bodies. It was very important. John Sobrino said to me, why did the death squads do that? Sending a message to all of Latin America, don't think about reality and think that you can make a difference, or this is what will happen to you. It's called deterrence or the cross. You know, this is what you get. If you think you can change the world, we're going to kill you like that. Powerful experience to have known great martyrs of the church. And that's why in 1993 with Philip Berrigan and 2 friends, we walked onto the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, the cutting edge of the whole Air Force war machine. 4 a.m, 2 miles. It's like 3 Chicago O'Hare airports. There's 75 F-15 nuclear-capable fighter bombers on alert to bomb Bosnia. Tens of thousands of soldiers. What do? We walked right up to one of the big fighter bombers, and we each took out a hammer, and I went up to the side of it, and I hammered once on it. Didn't even chip the paint. As I said to the judge later, Your Honor, we're just doing what it says in the Bible. You know, Isaiah said someday these people are going to come along and beat swords into plowshares and study war no more. And Your Honor, I'm just doing what Jesus said when he gave us that famous commandment. Love your enemies, don't nuke them. That's the actual translation from the Koine Greek. He didn't laugh at that either. Yeah, and for that, you know, I faced 20 years in prison and did 8 months in a cell and never left the cell. And it's the worst but greatest experience of my life. And I'm just telling you some stories. And worked at the Fellowship of Reconciliation was a great experience, and worked in September 11th, was the coordinator of the chaplains for the Red Cross, and was also coordinating the demonstrations in Times Square against the bombing of Afghanistan. The New York Times wrote about me. This guy's weird. He's serving the families of 9/11, and he's leading the protests against Afghanistan. The Jesuits had so many complaints, so I was kicked out of New York. And I went to New Mexico because my priest friend there said, well, when they kick you out, come to the desert because nobody cares about us out here. But New Mexico is the poorest state in the country. Number 1 in poverty, number 1 in drunk driving, suicide, domestic violence, child hunger, worst education system, worst medical system. Number 1 in military recruiting, military spending. There are more nuclear weapons in New Mexico at the Albuquerque airport than any place on the planet. Did you know that? 1,900 nuclear bombs right at the Albuquerque airport. Maybe there's a city in northern Russia. And there's the poorest county in the country near the San Ildefonso Pueblo. Poorest county in the country. And above it is the mountaintop, which has more millionaires and PhDs per capita than any place on the planet. Los Alamos, where every nuclear bomb has been built by our country. And we started a peace campaign there. And that's gotten me in a lot of trouble with the church. It's been an amazing experience. Just saying, friends, good people, stop building nuclear weapons. This money belongs to the poor of New Mexico and the rest of the world. It's not brain surgery. And it's an amazing experience. Well, it's a journey. What happened when I was 21 was I went and saw Daniel Berrigan. I was asked to interview him for Pax Christi at an early age. And I wanted to ask him the meaning of life. But I was so nervous because I was like the novice climbing the mountain, meeting the guru. And he's Father Daniel Berrigan. He's on the cover of Time magazine, helped end the Vietnam. And I was so scared, Kate. And I'm asking him questions. I'm a dopey kid, and I'm going, Father Dan, Dan, what's the point of all this again? I just blurted it out like a kid. And Daniel Berrigan said to me when I was 21, he took a deep breath and said, okay, John, all you have to do is make your story fit into the story of Jesus. Are there any questions? Isn't that great? Because I thought he was going to say, you got to go end all the wars. And then later I thought, oh my God, what he said is maybe harder. How are you doing with fitting your story into the story of Jesus? And I saw Daniel Berrigan do that up till the day he died. Spectacular life. This is what we're all trying to do right now in this moment, this terrible moment, which Dan was always saying was coming. You cannot bomb and destroy the planet, steal their resources, hurt all our own poor, and think things, without a resistance and a movement, things are going to get better. It leads to fascism and the destruction of democracy and the destruction of the earth and the collapse of goodness. And that's what we're seeing now with this new administration, with he who must not be named. My response was the week of the inauguration, some friends and I climbed the steps of the Supreme Court. And it was the 40th anniversary of the modern death penalty era, and I had worked very closely with Mother Teresa to try to stop the death penalty, and Sister Helen Prejean. And so 18 of us, the heads of Black Lives Matter, Sojourners, all church people, amazing people, held this banner, the size of this wall on this Supreme Court steps, about 6 weeks ago, right around the inauguration, saying, stop executions. You can see it on Facebook. It was incredible. Okay, it was a great action, and we're crazy. Okay, we're like the Acts of the Apostles. No, they chained us and covered us in chains. This is just 6 weeks ago. And we were tied to the wall and to each other. Some people started having panic attacks. My friends, we were hardened. No, that didn't come out right. We were seasoned activists. I was going to say hardened criminals, but... And it was awful. And it was like a foretaste of what's to come.
And that's why we're not laughing.
I know. And but it was great, because church people should be standing up. And we're doing it, and we're going to keep doing it. And that's really what I want to say to you. We were thrown in the cell at about midnight. Little tiny cell, this tall, and fluorescent lights. And you couldn't really lie down because you're immediately covered with cockroaches. And we were there for about 48 hours, and we weren't fed. And clearly they were going after me and some others and wanted to put us away for the summer. And so I was just in court last week, and I'm doing some community service. And the judge later this summer may indeed put me in court. I'm just sharing with you, what do we do? How do you take new steps? And I want to encourage you to continue your journey in Hawaii. So very, very important place you live in. And I thank you for all you're doing for peace and justice. And I want you not to give up, but to redouble your efforts. We have to. It's a responsibility, just for our own humanity. Let me just say a few thoughts about this then. The thing that got me was Martin Luther King's quote the night before they killed him. It's right there. You know the famous speech in Memphis. I've been to the mountaintop. I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. And I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land. You all remember that part. But what maybe you don't remember was what he said just before that. Look it up. The choice is no longer violence or nonviolence. That's not what we're talking about. Well, then what, Martin? The choice is nonviolence or non-existence. Unless the whole human race embraces nonviolence as a new way of life, we are doomed to our self-destructive addiction and behavior. Those are the last words of our great holy prophet. That's what you and I are coping with right now. That's what we're seeing in the newspapers. With the closest threat to nuclear war maybe than ever, catastrophic climate change bearing down upon us. It's very hard to talk about what's going on. 4 billion people in subhuman conditions. That without adequate food, water, healthcare, jobs, education, dignity. No, that doesn't get it. The UN says over 800 million people are starving to death. There are 35 wars happening right now. The United States is waging full-scale war in 7 nations, thanks to President Obama. Right now, tonight, we are bombing 7 nations, but we're involved in every war, selling weapons to both sides in every war. So it's way beyond he who must not be named. It's a system of total violence, permanent war. How do you describe this moment that we're going through? 16,000 nuclear weapons. I haven't even mentioned racism, police brutality and mass incarceration, sexism, torture, the executions that continue. I'm going to Little Rock in 3 weeks to speak at the Clinton Presidential Library, and they're going to execute 8 people in 5 days there. And the activists are struggling to resist what's happening to us as we move into, Cornel West says, the Fourth Reich. And I've been really studying catastrophic climate change like maybe you have, and our self-hatred, our addiction to violence, this plague of violence that is leading to the destruction of Mother Earth. Dan, what are we talking about here? An addiction to violence. Systemic, structured, institutionalized violence. Dan called it, Daniel Berrigan, death as a social methodology. We bring good things to death. No! Dorothy Day, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, they come along and say, folks, violence doesn't work. War doesn't work. I'm trying to put it stupidly, and I think it's kind of funny the way I'm saying it. I thought you'd laugh at that. War doesn't work. Actually, war never brings peace. War always sows the seeds for future war. Violence, in response to violence, always leads to further violence. It's a never-ending downward spiral. You reap what you sow. The means are the end. What goes around comes around. War always brings division, the seeds of hatred and killing. But what they said, and what you and I want to say is, not only do we have to stop the killing and the culture of war, we do not bring good things to death. We say, war is not the will of God. There is no just war. War is never justified. War is never blessed. War is the definition of a mortal sin. War is the demonic. That's what anti-Christ, anti-humanity, anti-life means. Peaceful means are the only way to a peaceful future and the God of peace. Isn't that a lovely thought? But I'm with Gandhi and Dr. King, and it's very hard to talk about peace, I think, in the United States, because the word is just so corrupted. I was speaking at the high school in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Pray for me. These poor kids born on a nuclear waste dump, and their parents building nuclear bombs, and 20,000 people, and they're all Christian. They all go to church. The priest blesses the nuclear bombs. It's way beyond the Crusades in the Middle Ages. And they're saying, we are the greatest peacemakers on the planet. That's what our parents told us. Los Alamos is all about peace. And the word love is very complicated, I love my car. That's why I use this word that nobody likes, nonviolence. And I urge you to use it. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit. And that's why, Wally, I thank you for having this series on it. Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi used this word morning, noon, and night, that they're saying it's our only hope, our only way forward, our only way to reclaim our humanity. Of course, they're talking about love and truth and peace. But it's language. The language has been so co-opted. So I invite you to talk about the word, define it in your families, in the church, in your workplace. What do you mean by nonviolence? How are you a nonviolent person? How can you become a more nonviolent person? How can we help Honolulu and Hawaii become more nonviolent? Because, friends, it seems to me it's becoming more warlike and militarized and violent. It's like every place in the world. Am I right? Yeah. That's why this is so important. And change only comes from bottom-up grassroots movement. Here's how I define it. Nonviolence is a vision of the heart, if you're with me here for a moment, that sees, if you're with me, Every human being on the planet is your very sister and brother. Equal to your blood brothers and sisters. Every human being, all 7.2 billion people, your sister and brother. And the deeper you go into the truth of reality, that we're all one, already reconciled, already united, that all life is sacred, that the more you spend time in your spiritual journey into that truth, you realize that we're one with the creatures and Mother Earth and the universe. It's so beautiful. You can never hurt anybody ever again, much less kill somebody or be silent in the face of what? 16,000 nuclear weapons, 35 wars, 800 million sisters and brothers starving to death today, catastrophic climate change. So there's nothing passive about this. We're talking about active love, pursuing the truth of our common unity, if you're with me, persistently reconciling with every human being on the planet, standing up publicly and resisting the forces and structures and systems of death. Say, no, we don't do that. Allowing the God of peace to disarm our hearts of the roots of violence within us so that we are instruments of God's holy peace. Practicing from this night forward to the day of our death, unconditional, all-inclusive, all-encompassing, non-retaliatory, sacrificial, universal love for the whole human race. Isn't that great? You're looking at me like, that guy's had way too much coffee. Just way over the top. Well, here's where we're going to disagree. I presume. I hope not. There's just one catch with what I just said. Are you sitting down? There is no cause for which you and I will ever again, no matter what they tell us, support the taking of a single human life. We do not kill people. We do not support the killing of our sisters and brothers. We do not kill people who kill people to show them that they shouldn't kill people. The days of killing are over. What do you think of that? No, you gotta kill somebody. We gotta kill Hitler. We gotta kill Osama bin Laden. This is the addiction. You know, John, this is really great, but I promise I will join AA, but I'm just going to have that one last drink. It's like if I just can kill somebody, then I'll become a peace person. So really what we're talking about, this is a meeting of Violence Anonymous tonight. On your speaker, hi, I'm John, I'm addicted to violence. I'll tell you my sad story. We turn to our higher power, we're making restitution, and on a journey to the sobriety of nonviolence. Isn't that great? Yeah, that's what we're doing, because we're never going to be perfectly nonviolent, but we can work at it. Gandhi says then, what we're talking about is what? It's a way of life. It's way beyond Gandhi and King's tactic and strategy. It's a spiritual path to the God of peace. We're going to try to be nonviolent like our God. It's a method, it's a way of hope, but actually it's also a methodology of social change. That when we can organize this, Gandhi says, it's more powerful than all the weapons of the world combined. Now you're going, oh, Gandhi, come on. No, he gets the British to leave nonviolently. Dr. King brings down the segregation laws nonviolently. The People Power movement in the Philippines, as you know, gets Marcos to leave nonviolently. There have been 85 nonviolent revolutions the last 30 years. Did you know this? The thing is now, it's all documented. This incredible social scientist named Erica Chenoweth wrote the most important book in the last 50 years, Why Civil Resistance Works. And they studied 1900 to 2006 every single global conflict. And where nonviolence was used, it led to nonviolent resolution of conflict and a nonviolent democracy. Gandhi was right. Isn't that fantastic? So I've been thinking about this for years. And I wrote this book about nonviolence because I'm trying to figure out how to talk about it. And the book is called The Nonviolent Life, if you want to get it. And this is the thesis. So just humor me, okay, as you are. Nonviolence requires 3 simultaneous attributes. This is what I've concluded after working on this for 40 years. Number 1, you got to do all 3, okay? Here's the catch. Number 1, you got to be really nonviolent to yourself. Piece of cake. Number 2, you got to be perfectly, meticulously nonviolent toward every human being on the planet and all the creatures and to the earth. And number 3, at the same time, you have to have one foot in the global grassroots movement of nonviolence. Well, I can see you didn't like that. See, my thought as I travel the country is that we're really good at 1 or 2 of those. But very few people reach the sanctity of Dorothy Day and Martin Luther King, which is this holistic, integral nonviolence. And that's what you and I have to do, especially in the age of what we're beginning now. We all have to stand up and become who we were created to be. Now, a lot of us church people are really nice. It concerns me. I'm trying to make laugh, but you see what I'm saying. I remember my first speech in 1985, this wonderful woman stood up and said, well, that just sounds beautiful. I'm going to spend the rest of my life becoming perfectly peaceful. And when I achieve that, then I'll help you and the rest of the world, work for peace. That's not Christianity. That's not peacemaking. This just working on yourself. You see what I mean? You got to get involved in the movement. On the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of us activists, full-time, and we're mad, and we're mean, and we're angry, and we're all for peace. That's not working. That's not working either. And then you see the people I met, I sought them all out, Wally. Archbishop Tutu, that guy shouldn't be allowed out in public. He's so hilariously funny. He was way funnier than Robin Williams. And by the way, so was Mother Teresa and Daniel Berrigan and Thich Nhat Hanh, in my experience. Joan Baez says Dr. King is the funniest person she ever met in her life. Do you think that about Dr. King? They're way beyond their anger. Do you see what I mean? That's what I want. And they're changing the world. Tutu has been under death threat every day of his life since he was 13, until even now, as he's an older, sick man. It's amazing, and yet there's so much joy. So this is what I want us to invite us to. So number 1, how are you doing with the violence inside you? I think we're all wounded people, all of us victims of this culture of violence. And it's really important, if you're going to stand up publicly in Hawaii and hold up a sign and say some things publicly, you better be doing your inner work. Because when they start yelling at you, and you're thinking about what happened, you may respond back violently, but it has to do with what happened in your childhood, or, you're not monitoring yourself. This is how it all works. So this is why it's all connected and so important. What we want to do is to cultivate interior nonviolence. This is the spiritual life, This is why we pray. We turn to our higher power and we help one another. If we're all wounded people, what happened to you? Your mother or father were violent to you, your brothers and sisters, or in school, or it was racism, or it was sexism, or it was the Vietnam War, the Korean War, something in the culture, you got hurt. Now, are you going to go forward and be a wounded wounder or a wounded healer? And what we want to do is not beat ourselves up and continue the inner cycle of violence. And this is very important for peacemaking. We want to, I always say, radiate personally the peace we seek politically. I don't claim to be doing that, but I claim to be trying. And that's all. That's all we're going to try to be consciously conscious of what's going on. So we're really peaceful people, and then after the peace meeting, we want to run somebody off the road. And we're leaving Mass, and I'm going to cut them off, because look, how could they? And then you're really mad, I hate myself again, and I'm going to beat myself up. No, see, this is, okay, well then look at that. This, my friend Thich Nhat Hanh says, a beautiful teaching. Just look deeply within. Why am I acting that way? Why am I feeling that way? Oh, that's because somebody did something to me 2 weeks ago and I wasn't processing it. We're talking about real mindfulness here in the Buddhist sense, and in creating a space for the God of peace to live within us. That's why you just have to go and spend time in prayer and let God disarm your heart. Well, Those lovely thoughts, and I invite you as a peacemaker to be doing your inner work. But secondly, meticulous interpersonal nonviolence. Well, how's that going for you? I mean, we're all for peace, right? Is this Lent? I always used to joke, yeah, we're all for peace, but deep down there's just like a few people we'd like to get back at with just a little vengeance, a little violence. Well, I thought for sure you'd laugh at that, but I think I touched a nerve. But it's amazing, this thing within us and among us. And the culture now is stirring up violence. It's like normal. That's what I'm seeing with the Trump administration. It's all violence. And we could talk details about immigration or Muslims, the manifestations of violence, but it's in all of us. I just invite you to reflect on your relationships. What we're talking about is being really nonviolent to your spouse, really nonviolent to your children and grandchildren, really nonviolent to your neighbors, really nonviolent to everybody in the workplace, really nonviolent to everybody in the church, really nonviolent to everybody in Honolulu and Hawaii, and being part of an attitude and movement of nonviolence to the world. And who is it who pushes your buttons? Let's just say a difficult person in your life. It's strange because that person is actually your teacher of nonviolence. Why? Because they're exposing all your violence because you want to kill them. That's your teacher. This is what I learned from Henry Nouwen. He used to say that to me. No, that's not my teacher. The guy's a jerk. It's his problem. No, it's my problem. This person is a gift in my life because now I get to practice nonviolence with that person who pushes your buttons. This is what Lent, by the way, is supposed to be about. It's a deepening of nonviolence. And how are you going to be trained? How well are you trained to respond nonviolently to the threat of violent assault? You've got to do workshops. And my group, Pace Bene, we're organizing nonviolence trainings across the country. If you haven't had them here in Honolulu or here at the Newman Center, organize one. Or bring some of us in. Or you will learn how to do it. Because as things continue to get worse, which they're going to, and people don't have the training that you and I have of peace and nonviolence, and they're out in the streets, when push comes to shove, they're going to shove back, and that's not going to help. Violence in response to violence is just what the culture of violence wants. But we want the cognitive dissonance of a nonviolent response where just everybody goes, well, we just can't work with these people, and you give in. This is how the methodology works. Study nonviolence. We never had so many books come out. By the way, nonviolence to all the creatures. Nonviolence to Mother Earth. And making those connections. The biblical word for nonviolence in the whole Bible, according to Thomas Merton, is not agape in love. It's the third beatitude, meekness. It's a very bad translation, blessed are the meek. But it's actually, blessed are the actively nonviolent, like in the Gandhian sense. But what does Jesus say? He's just amazing. Blessed are the nonviolent. They shall inherit the earth. Jesus connects nonviolence with creation. Well, if you're a people of violence, you will be disconnected with the earth and eventually destroy it. Do you see? This is what I'm finding very helpful. But the third, to have one foot in the grassroots movement of nonviolence. The world is moving in a good direction, and you won't hear about it on any of the media. But in the alternative media, you'll find it. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of movements of nonviolence around the world. It's very hopeful. We've never had so much energy. And in last January, 6 weeks ago was it, 6 million people marched on the day after the inauguration in the women's movement. It was very hopeful. And no violence. And this resistance works. The only way social change happens, look it up, is through bottom-up grassroots movements. That's how we nonviolently change the world. And you have to be a part of it, friends. If you are and have been, thank you. Thank you. And keep at it with a good heart. If you haven't been, get involved. Just pick a cause where you're passionate. Environmental movement, the immigration movement, standing with our Muslim sisters and brothers, or working to fight poverty or war. Archbishop Romero said it beautifully. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Every one of us is Rosa Parks. That could be that spark. Every one of us is needed. Every one of us brings a gift. So helpful and important. The group I'm working with, as you saw the brochure on your table, we launched a campaign called Campaign Nonviolence 4 years ago, trying to get the movement moving. So we said, well, what they do in Europe, let's call for a whole week of national action. So we picked September, around September 21st, International Peace Day, and that week we're declaring National Campaign Nonviolence Week. And we've asked people to take to the streets against everything. War, racism, police brutality, mass incarceration, poverty, the cutting of health care, education. Shall I go on? Nuclear weapons, drones, billions, trillions more for war, environmental destruction, all of that. To connect the dots, friends, that this is all one global epidemic of structured violence that's killing us and our sisters and brothers. And there's a way out that Dr. King and Gandhi ji have taught us, if we dare grasp it. And we ask people to uphold Dr. King's vision of the coming of a new culture of peace and nonviolence. It's lovely. And you know what happened? We were totally ignored by the media, but now last year we documented it. 758 events in the streets in all 50 states, connecting all the dots. Did you know this? No, but Wally did an event, David did an event in Maui. Little Rock had 37 events. You're Hawaii, folks. I'm trying to inspire you, and it's not working here. How should I invite you to consider doing something in September, or a couple events. And you can do whatever you want. We have this great state-of-the-art website. We're hoping for 1,000 to 1,500 events in September. And the thing is, from Alaska to North Dakota to Florida, you're not alone. Despite what the culture says, there are people just like you around the country, met a lot of them, marching. And this is how movements begin. But you're also injecting the wisdom and way of nonviolence, which is what we really need. Modeling it, talking about it, and it should be a whole week of nonviolence. We've also launched the Nonviolent Cities Project. This is based on this city called Carbondale, Illinois. And I was speaking there 5 years ago, and I said, what are you all doing? And they said, well, nothing was working, so we decided to pretend we're Martin Luther King and imagine our city as a nonviolent city. And I went, excuse me? And so they started to have their meetings at the city council meeting and got the politicians talking about how can we get 50 years from now, Carbondale is totally nonviolent. Then we started to meet with the police department, no more killings. Then we went to the school system, the health care, the prison, the inner cities. And they're transforming their city because they're using the imagination. So we launched this, and we have 50 cities where activists are working on this right now. That might be a tool for you. Nonviolent Honolulu. What would that look like? What would it be like to talk with your mayor in your city about that? That's what, I could go through the list because I'm working on this all the time. Fresno, Tiffin, Ohio, Owensburg, Kentucky. The activists just met with their city council. And I could go on and on. But this is a clever and a great idea, and it's already happening. I think this is taking Dr. King to another level. We may be stuck with national organizing, given the Trump administration, but you can do local and regional organizing. And what we need is a nonviolent Hawaii. We need a nonviolent Maui. And you have more power than you realize. You have power. Well, I've been drinking coffee all day. Can I say a few more things? Or you're already at your wit's end? Well, so what I find so incredible about Gandhi is he comes along and he said, I read this as a kid, he's going, he learned all of this from reading the Sermon on the Mount. Did you know that Mahatma Gandhi read the Sermon on the Mount every morning, every evening for over 45 years? I went to the place in India where he actually sat on the ground and did that. Do you? He's not even a Christian. He's saying, these are the greatest teachings of nonviolence in the history of the world. I want to be a person of nonviolence. This is my handbook. I better read it. It's like a how-to manual. That's how he became Gandhi. We don't want to become ourselves, our nonviolent heroes. But I invite us to do that. Go back and read Matthew 5. And then he came to the conclusion, he said, Jesus is the greatest person of nonviolence in the history of the world. I just love that. And then poor Gandhi goes on and he says, and the only people on the whole planet who don't know that Jesus is nonviolent are Christians. Do you believe Gandhi? Was Jesus violent or nonviolent? It's a really important question. The whole world has basically renounced the real Jesus and said he's violent. Gandhi and this theologian, John Mackenzie, you could read the fine book, said, the only thing you can say for sure about Jesus is that he's nonviolent. Isn't that amazing? If that's true, our lives have to become, if you want to, I'm just saying, if you want to follow this guy, I'm just saying. If you want to follow this guy, he's nonviolent, you have to become a nonviolent person. Or you're not following this guy. I'm just saying. It changes all our theology, our ecclesiology, our spirituality. That Jesus is the incarnation of peace and nonviolence. That the Sermon on the Mount, everything is a vision of nonviolence and practical teachings. From you've heard it said, thou shalt not kill. I say, don't even get angry. You're like, excuse me, Jesus? Offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. Do not offer, it's the Greek word, antistene. We do not offer antistene, violent retaliation. That's forbidden. Love your enemies. It's amazing teaching. Then you'll be sons and daughters of the God who lets the sun rise on the good and the bad, the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Be as compassionate as God. Hunger and thirst for justice. Blessed are the peacemakers. Seek first the kingdom of God. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And then Jesus, he's healing everybody. He's got this great ministry. And he turns and he marches to Jerusalem. I always say Jesus thinks he's Gandhi. And he's going all the way like a nonviolence right into the temple where the religious authorities are working with the empire to steal all the money for the people. You have to pay your life savings to get in to the temple to see God. It's the only place where God lived on the planet, in that building. You have to pay your life money. Jesus walks in and does nonviolent civil disobedience. He turns over the tables of the money changers. This is the guy we follow. He doesn't hit anybody, hurt anybody, kill anybody, or drop any nuclear bombs. I just wanted to clarify that one little point. But wow, this guy is not passive. This is active, dangerous, public, confrontative, what? Revolutionary, civilly disobedient, troublemaking, illegal activity. Then I wrote this book about the civil disobedience, and there were so many episodes, I came up with all these categories. Then I concluded everything Jesus did was illegal. He was like a one-man crime wave walking through the Roman Empire. You're not buying any of this. This is the guy, that's what I said at this speech. It's 8 o'clock, I know, it's nearly midnight, but I was talking this way in 2003 when the Iraq War started in this packed church in Denver, and this lady raised her hand and she said, John, in front of the whole church, this stuff that you're talking about, nonviolence, is so interesting. It's really intriguing, really. And me personally, I'm a big fan of peace. Big fan. But sometimes you just gotta kill somebody. She said that. Is that what you're thinking? The church was right in the history, in a nutshell. In 315, the emperor converted to Christianity. Christianity was an illegal religion the first 3 centuries. Now he said, you're all legal, therefore you can all join the Roman army. And they all did, and they took up weapons. They literally threw out the Sermon on the Mount. He said, let's turn to Cicero. He's a much better guy, none of the Sermon on the Mount stuff. And that's where we had the beginning of the just war theory. And then Augustine said in the City of God in the 5th century, sometimes you can kill your enemies. They really like it. It's good for them. That's the best way to love your enemies. Read it. And then you got the Middle Ages, when the cardinals led the battles, the Crusades, where we got to go and kill millions of those horrible people for Jesus. And then we men burned women at the stake, and we white people held million slaves, and the priest blesses the nuclear bombs today, as nearly all priests bless war today. If that's what you're thinking, go to what happens next in the story. They're in the upper room. He takes the bread. He takes the cup. My body broken for you. My blood shed for you. If Jesus were a good American, what should he have said? Go break their bodies for me. Go shed their blood for me. That's the logic of violence. That's the logic of this country. That's what you and I believe in. No. My body broken for you. My blood shed for you. Do this. Every time you come to Eucharist, you are entering into the new covenant of nonviolence, the methodology of nonviolence, which says we do not kill people. We rather accept suffering and death rather than kill our sisters and brothers. You don't like that? Go to what happens next in the Garden of Gethsemane. Here come the horrible soldiers. What does St. Peter do? Peter's thinking, oh my God, they're going to kill our guy, the Holy One. I got to do something. And he's right. He's thinking, if there's ever a just war in all of human history, if violence was ever divinely sanctioned, if there was ever a moment to kill, it's now in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's right. We got to kill them to protect our guy, the Holy One. And just as he goes to kill the Roman soldier, the commandment comes down, put down the sword. Friends, those are the last words of Jesus to the church. That's the last thing his community of women and men ever heard him say before he died. Think of that. Have you thought of it that way? That's the first time they understood who this guy is. You can imagine Peter. Oh my God, this hippie is so full about this agape, peace, compassion. He's not going to kill to protect himself, which, and you do the math, that means we're not allowed to kill to protect ourselves, which means we're out of here. I think. And Gandhi, who's the greatest Christian theologian in the words of Dr. King, says Jesus goes even deeper into nonviolence. They torture him and execute him. No anger, totally centered, been centering, practicing every moment of his life, dies saying the violence stops here in my body. You're all forgiven, but the days of killing are over. If you want to follow me, we're walking this new journey of nonviolence. That's what you and I are about. He comes back, no violence, no retaliation, no revenge, not a drop of anger. Peace be with you, peace be with you, peace be with you. Now you walk the road of nonviolence. 4 concluding points. That means, number 1, I think, we have to be contemplatives of nonviolence. These are difficult days, and they're going to get much worse. I've tried not to spend too much, any time almost talking about Trump, because it's, I think, more important to talk about nonviolence and Jesus and rooting ourselves in it. But the way to do that is to go deeper into prayer in your relationship with the God of peace, and allow the God of peace to disarm your heart of the violence in you. We don't want to be bullies anymore, especially bullies for peace, or Americans like Trump and so many of us are modeling. We want to enter into the dangerous nonviolence of Jesus. We want to become mystics of nonviolence. That we're a threat to the military establishment. Wally, that's what we're trying to do. And it's wonderful. That's one way of looking at Gandhi's life. Well, really spending time with prayer, in prayer with the God of peace, which is a relationship. Why do you not want to do that? Why do you not want to spend time with someone who loves you unconditionally without any violence in God? Because all your violence comes up. Your junk. This is good. Let it all go, friends. Give it all to God. Your anger, your hurts, your resentment, your bitterness, your hatred, all the revenge and retaliation in you, we can let it go. We can forgive everyone who ever hurt us. We can move deeper into compassion and let God give us the resurrection gift of peace. Secondly, we have to be activists of nonviolence. When I was with Cesar Chavez shortly before he died, he told me, for the rest of your life, when you're ever with a group of people and they say to you, what should we do? Here's what you tell them. So this is what I've been doing. Public action, public action, public action. You have to engage in some modest public action for justice and peace. I find that a helpful spiritual practice. How's that going for you? If you're not engaged, get with a group. Talk to Wally. Form campaign nonviolence. Work on that week of action at least. Third, we have to be prophets of nonviolence. And by that I simply mean speaking out publicly in the name of the God of peace and saying, stop hurting our sisters and brothers or turning them away. Welcome everyone. Get rid of all this violence. End all these wars. Feed our starving sisters and brothers. Clean up the earth. Find alternatives to fossil fuels. Abolish these nuclear weapons. Spend those trillions for humanity, especially the poor. Feed everyone on the planet and educate everyone in nonviolent conflict resolution. You have to speak out. Don't be afraid to speak out. Gently and with love. Fourth, lastly, we have to be visionaries of nonviolence. We are totally blind. Dorothy Day called us the blindest of the blind because we're so sick in our violence. That's one way to put it. You know, one way to think about, well, how should I put this? One of the casualties of this moment, the culture of violence and war, is the loss of the imagination, the loss of vision. We can't see where we could be, who we could be. And one way to describe Jesus is he had a great imagination. This is who you are. You're the beloved sons and daughters of God. Go forth and welcome the reign of God. That's the vision of Jesus. I studied the abolitionists. These people are wacky. 200 years ago. This is my impression of Frederick Douglass and Lloyd Garrison. We are announcing, you can't even say it with a straight face, it's crazy. They used to do this in 1820. We are announcing tonight the abolition of slavery. And thousands said, what are you, crazy? You can't get rid of slavery. No, you cannot get rid of slavery. There's nothing that can be done. It's always existed. It's in the Bible. Some people aren't people. And all the abolitionists said, no. A new world is coming. A new world of equality. What they did was they reclaimed the imagination of what it means to be a human being. And they lifted up this vision of who we could be, who we were created to be. And that was the beginning of the end of the American slave trade and the British slave trade. Friends, they're our ancestors. Our job is harder than theirs. We have to stand on their shoulders. This is what you've been doing in your work for peace and justice, and what you have to do for the rest of your lives, to stand up in Honolulu and tell the mainland and the rest of the world, excuse me, tonight, here in Honolulu, we are announcing the abolition of war. No. And poverty, and hunger, and racism, and sexism, and torture, and executions, and nuclear weapons, and the destruction of the environment. Everybody's going to say, what are you, crazy? I'm going to say, no. Like Dr. King, a new world of nonviolence is coming. We can have that if we help each other see, if we build a movement. This is the most important thing we can do with our lives. This is the spiritual life. This is our humanity. This is who you are and who you were created to be. The infinitely loved, beloved daughters and sons of the God of peace, peacemakers. Thank you for listening.